So you're in the market for a new wheel, eh? Well, Cube Controls has just dropped their new flagship, the CSX3. Let's look at the cloth. Okay, so it's 283 millimeters wide. Points of contact are all carbon fiber, aside from the buttons. It just feels really, really nice under hand. Okay, so on the back here, we have 6 paddles. We have 2 clutches, as I mentioned, carbon fiber touch points. Very positive click. So it's not, I've managed to dial it out for my streams. It is quite loud, but nothing that you can't overcome. And the 2 top paddles are the same kind of clicky feeling, but they're a bit quieter, definitely more dull. Okay, and then on the front, we have 2 7-way funky switches. I love this, absolutely very handy. You don't need to bind any extra buttons or use your mouse typically in most sim titles if they allow you to bind them. Plenty of rotary encoders. So we have, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10 technically if you include the funky switches. We have all the buttons on the front as well. They have a nice feel, very positive click, and then yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. Okay, and then we have a 4-inch Vocor screen here and your LEDs. Okay, so we have a 3+3 for your lights as well as your shift indicator. Okay, so pricing. How much of your hard-earned are you going to have to part with to get one of these things? Well, in Australia currently, they're $24.99 Australian dollars. In euros, they're 13.59 euros. And you'll have to check with all your local duties, shipping costs and taxes, obviously. But realistically, this falls in the upper echelon of wheels in terms of pricing, and it comes up against other brands such as GSI, Grid Engineering, even though I don't believe they have a wheel with a screen on at the moment. But this is a very high-end product, and we are going to be reviewing as such. Alrighty, so let's start with the positives. Okay, so this wheel has a very good size, grip, and ergonomics. Alright, so I've actually found that I don't need any other wheels to for my overall racing experience. So I used to use a 300mm wheel for GT3 stuff and another Cube Controls wheel for like Formula kind of stuff. Now, since getting this, I've actually found that they've done some tweaking to the ergonomics a little bit, and I no longer need the 300mm wheel. So I actually recouped some costs to put towards, paying for this wheel. But yeah, I'm absolutely stoked with the feel of the wheel in hand. And also that 283mm has given me enough feedback so that it's counteracted the weight really. So that the weight difference that I've found from my old Cube Controls wheel, this one is a little bit heavier, has dulled down the force. I am using it on a VRS DFP, which produces around 20 newton-meters of peak force pressure. I actually use most of that force, use it to the point of clipping. So taking away some of those effects, I thought I would miss them, but it's actually a better experience in hand. Okay, so another good feature for the CSX3 here is the 3, 11 and 3 LED strips. So they're extremely bright if you want them to be. Okay, so they worked out of the box as soon as I imported the profiles into Simhub. Everything just worked as it should. So very good work there. The Vocor screen I actually had a little bit more trouble with. I was an early adopter, so this is a relative long-term review. I had to find the drivers and install the drivers myself for this one. Okay, so I believe that's not an issue anymore, but I did have a little bit of trouble getting it going. So that's an 800 by 480 display here. I'll chuck that number up on the screen if I'm wrong, but it's a perfectly sharp display. You don't need any more pixels per inch on a display like this, especially when you're driving. You know, it's moving. It's well sharp enough. Okay, so the only issue that I've had really, and it's not one that can be changed because of the size of the wheel, 4 inches is a little bit small in my opinion. Okay, now I know we're dealing with sending the data over the USB protocol as well. but it only does run at around that 30 FPS mark as well. So I don't believe there's any way around that because we're sending a lot of information through the USB protocol here, but yeah, 30 FPS and 4 inches. It's a display that's there. You can use it, but how much relevant information you're going to be able to put on there is kind of up to the user and how you set that up. But I've actually found it's ended up being a bit of a gimmick, nearly. You know, I'm actually in VR now, so take that for what you will. But I do miss the information that was on there, but I've found that I'm not missing it too much. The next one that we have here is the buttons. Now, I've heard some people whinging about these, but I've actually found that they have a very positive click, okay? So that is enough for me, especially being in VR now. They have a really nice surrounds, which you can feel the difference even in gloves, okay? So this plastic shroud here, you can feel which button that you're on, and you know when you click it, you're getting the right setting that you're chasing, okay? Okay, so that's what it sounds like. Pretty close to my microphone, it should be pretty audible. They are quite loud, but it's a positive click, you know, so nothing to complain about there. The one complaint that I do have with these buttons, that gloves, no gloves, it hasn't really mattered. You can actually see here that I'm delaminating the stickers, okay? So as I mentioned, I've been using this for quite a while, quite regular user as well. But I have actually found that I don't believe that I'll have stickers on this in the long run, okay? So not too sure if it was a user error with application, but unfortunately these stickers are delaminating. Alrighty, so the next point that we've got to talk about here is the front encoders. Okay, so they all have beautiful anodized aluminum finish, nice feel under hand. There's 8 of them, more than you can poke a stick at. You'll be struggling to find things to bind them to, okay? So they all feel amazing with the exception of these 2 thumb encoders that are, you know, close to the center on the inside. They are quite hard to actuate, okay? So you can't actually actuate them with the back of your finger to provide an extra level of kind of feel there. Really hard to actuate, okay? So I've found that I'm not using them as much. When I was trying to use them, I was hitting them twice, you know, it just wasn't working for me, but your use may vary, I guess. Okay, so the other one that I want to point out here is this magnetic cable. This is a huge step forward in terms of cabling and by far the best solution for cabling that any manufacturer has, okay? So basically it's a magnetic cable, only goes in one way, proprietary plug. If you try and plug it in the other way, it won't work. I've never had this come off. It is perfectly strong. As I mentioned, I use very high force feedback settings in my games, and yeah, it's magnificent. Alrighty, so let's go over some of the other things in the box here. As I mentioned, I have my qualms with the stickers, but there are plenty of options. If I ever need to replace anything, all I'll do is I'll grab some alcohol wipes and I'll clean the stickers off and put some new ones on. Alright, so the only other thing that to mention that comes in the box is your toolkit, plenty of tools, spares, everything you may need. You will find that you will need to tighten down the shifters. Now let's go over that. So the shifters, did have my issues with the shifters. This is the original shifter that I received. As you can see, there's a pivot point here for the whole mechanism. Now I actually found, because I'm using those higher force feedback settings, I was pulling the shifters towards me. Now as you can see, I'm not the biggest guy out there, but at the same time I do physical work and I'm a bit stronger than I look, I guess. But I was really having a difficult time differentiating the force between, you know, my palms grabbing the wheel and my fingers whilst I was shifting. If I had to do a loaded corner and also shift up or down, you know, I was really struggling not to pull this mechanism towards me. Now Cube Controls very graciously sent me out a new shifter mechanism to test. I'm guessing they'll be updating their wheel in the future to include this if they haven't already. But basically, instead of one pivot point here, there's I'll try and show that on camera, but there's 2 screws there, okay? So those 2 screws, basically once you clamp them down, there really is a very, very, very small chance of it moving, okay? So you put enough force through anything, you're going to move it. But I haven't found that I've moved these after the fact. And having those two screws and the slot there allows the customization that anyone may want, so that they can get it comfortable. Okay, so in terms of customization, like I just mentioned, there are plenty of channels and slots, so you can shift the shifters out and in. That's good. You can actually change the angle as well on the up and down shift, and these top shifters here, I believe you can only shift them in and out, but I basically have everything on their widest setting. In terms of ergonomics, I've found that when I'm sitting here, my previous one, I actually had trouble because I think it was a bit higher from memory. This one, I don't know why, it just feels so much better under hand. I can't understand why they would have the shifters up here. It's just an unnatural position, but all been rectified now, which is perfect. I find that I have my, as I mentioned, I need to tighten this down, but the clutch paddles, I have them set probably 2/3 of the way out. I have relatively small hands, I'm 5'10". But yeah, basically they're in the right position for me. I can drop that and then release that one slowly off the launch. Yeah, I love everything on the back of this, and it all works as described. Alrighty, so we've booted up Simhub here. Now we're in the devices tab on the left hand side, and we're going to add a new device. Okay, so we'll find the Cube Control CSX3, add it, and then we're, oh my gosh. Alrighty, so we're in Simhub here, checking out the settings. Okay, so we're going to add new device in the devices tab, find the Cube Control CSX3, and then we're presented with this screen. Alright, so the initial tab here is the LCD tab that we can see. It shows us the screen that we're connected to. We want to enable the touch screen so that we can flick left and right between our pages, and then we can go and choose our dashboard. Now, there are plenty of dashboards out there to find. I have quite a few custom ones, scale the internet, but my current favorite is TWF dash. Now, I love this one because when you rotate the display, the gear and everything in the center of it rotates. Alrighty, so as you can see my settings here, I've got the brightness maxed out, the contrast I haven't touched, and the connection status is showing my idle dash, which I have set up. Alright, so we're going to go into the LED settings. I've found the 17 LED V5 CSX3. That's the profile that I'm using for the RGB, and the buttons I'm using another custom one here. Okay, so I'll show that on screen now, what it looks like when I'm not in sim. And alright, so we'll jump into the controls here. Now, I've actually bound a Cycle Next Dash template button to one of the encoders here on the left hand side. Totally up to you. Okay, so you can configure a whole heap of stuff here, change the brightness, change the buttons. I haven't got the advanced touch mode working just yet. Not too sure if that actually works, but I believe that the Vocal 4-inch does support it, so hopefully we get that to work in the future. Alright, so we'll go over the basic functions here. The inputs tab, which we're looking at here, has encoder pulse width. Basically, that is the gap between each actuation of your encoders, which will register with the wheel. So if you spin it quicker than 88 milliseconds, that won't register. Okay, so this can be useful for taking out some of those accidental double actuations, but yeah, you just play with this one until you find a setting which works for you. Okay, so calibrating the clutch paddles here is the only other thing you can do on this page, and basically all you do is you hit the calibrate button, pull the trigger all the way in, show it its full range of motion, and then you hit the save button here, the same button that you'll click, and that one should be calibrated. Okay, I'm not going to do it here because it works. Now, why I'm saying this, I've actually found this to be quite finicky to get working. Now that it's working, I don't want to touch it. Okay, but basically you calibrate it initially, get it working on both pages, and then you're done. Alrighty, so the RGBs here, we can go through and click on some custom colors. Just, you know, you can choose whatever you want, and then you can set up your RGBs this way. Alrighty, so as I mentioned, have had some issues getting the clutches calibrated. I am on an older version of Cubeset Software here because it works. Okay, so there is a newer version out, but I've had issues with it, and I'm not interested in troubleshooting that and getting it working. So currently, if I want to change my byte point, I boot up this application, I drag this back and forth, I don't bother with the encoders, and it will set correctly. Okay, so This one is set up so that I have my extra shifters enabled, my clutches enabled, and my left is my secondary clutch point. So basically that means my master is the right hand side. So if I pull that all the way in, that's going to be 0 to 100% of clutch, and then the left hand side is 0 to whatever you set here. Okay, so when you're fully pulling in that left hand side, it's currently going to be working at 32%. Okay, so another big one here, if you're finding that your shifters aren't working, this is where you go to make sure that they work. Okay, so all you do, it's exactly the same as the inputs. You click calibrate, pull it, click save or calibrate, whatever it says there. As I mentioned, it works. I don't want to change it here. Okay, so I actually found after I opened the screen up and I replugged it all back in, unfortunately this wasn't working even though everything was firmly seated. Yeah, I had to recalibrate everything and then it worked as it should. Okay, so the device tab here, basically this is where you go to upload your firmware, clear your flash data to reset it back to its default, and it will show you the status of the battery if you have one, or your Bluetooth settings. Alright, so the About tab here shows your Cubeset version as well as the firmware that you have loaded. As mentioned, I am on an older firmware and an older Cubeset version. Hopefully they can sort out whatever issues they have. Lots of people are having the same issue as me where the clutches just aren't responding well in iRacing, and if they're not working, I don't want to use them. So I've backdated and everything works as it should. Right here, before we get into sim, I just want to show you, this is the display that I have when the wheel is on. There is a button back here that I can use to turn the wheel off. So if I ever am not going to be using it for an extended amount of time, I always have a habit of turning that off there. Okay, so you boot it up, displays the Cube Controls logo, actuates the lights for a short time, and then it will load into whatever LED display you have configured. Okay, so that will only work obviously if Simhub is up, else it'll just display the default colors. Okay, so this is the TWF background that I've set up. I've customized it a little bit, so I've got a GIF in the background, my number, my name, etc, etc. Alrighty, so let's jump into the sim really quickly and see what this user experience is all about. Alrighty, so we're sitting in the beautiful Willow Springs pit lane here in the Formula 3. This is a test drive I had set up from last night from a race I did. So as I mentioned, I'm in the Pimax Crystal now, so I don't get to use the beautiful screen or the LEDs on this wheel, but I can still talk about the user experience and feel and what you're going to get out of this wheel here. Alright, so let's start off with the pits. Let's start off leaving the pits here, and I can show you. Alright, so that bar there on the right, on that left hand side that I'm looking at, now that is the clutch. So as you can see, I'm actuating the right hand side at the moment. I'm pulling with that hand, and it's actuating all the way up to 100% when I pull the right, and actuating 32% when I pull the left. So I'll hit the brakes here. I'll just show you what a launch in the F3 looks like. Okay, so that brake is automatic as I've got it set up that way, but basically I hold the throttle full, release the right hand side, and I can just slowly release that left. Perfect launches every time for me. Okay, so now let's talk about some of the other features here. So as I mentioned, I have this thing set up at shoulder height. It is perfect for me. I don't have any overexertion on my shoulders at this height. They're 283 millimeters. I'm finding that it's the perfect size for pretty much every car that I want to have a go in. Okay, so unbelievable ergonomics and feel. A definite upgrade from anyone that was running the previous generation of Cube Controls wheels. Okay, now the other features that I can talk about, the clutch paddles, as I mentioned, I'm actuating them there. You may be able to hear them, but I don't think they're distracting at all. Alright, so we've gone over the clutches, the shifters, and now let's talk about the other features here. So the two top paddles, I have one set up to take away my tear off, as you can see there. The other one I use for radio or Discord in this case. Alright, so I have the left hand one, because it's a tearaway, you can use it as much as you like in iRacing at the moment. I have that set up as a secondary, like a shift as well. So if I want to use extra features, all I do is I hold that tearaway button and I can bind multiple things to my funky switches or my encoders, whatever you want here. Alright, all the buttons in. Alright, so now as I mentioned, I wear gloves probably about half the time. Just anything that's got a lot of high force feedback and I'm doing a longer race, I typically put on a set of gloves. Sweat isn't really a factor for me. I have wind sims blowing straight onto me, onto my face, onto my hands. But all the same. I didn't really find grip to be an issue even when I wasn't running the WinSim. The grips on these really are a step up from the previous generation. There may be better materials out there, but these to me, they're perfect. Alright, now the buttons as well. As I mentioned, I don't have any issues finding the buttons that I want to find. I don't regularly use these ones down here. You will have to remove your hand, twist your hand off the wheel to find them. Same with these, same with the encoders in the center here, but once again, I don't have any trouble finding them in the race. One thing I kind of do wish they could set up is, instead of using a rotary encoder function, have it set up as a I don't know what the term is, but basically a position encoder, so that when I turn this wheel, say, I can go to different pages, because I only use a few pages typically on my black box here, but I find that if I want to quickly get to a page, I could go bang bang bang. I know 3 to the right and I'll beat the relatives, 4 to the right I'll beat the fuel, you know, that kind of thing. So I do wish that they had that functionality inbuilt, and it is a software thing that they could put in, I know, at a further date, but it's just one of my wishes. As you can see, this wheel just handles beautifully underhand. Got plenty of road feel with the VRS here. Got this set up at, as I mentioned, pretty high force feedback, but yeah, I'm not missing any detail here. It just handles beautifully. Really fun combo that I recommend to anyone that does iRacing. But yeah, the F3 at Willow Springs. What more can I say? This was really designed for this car, but oof, how am I driving? Amazing wheel for sim racing. I can't recommend this thing highly enough. Feels amazing underhand. I've done plenty of 3-hour stints and enduros in it without gloves. Haven't found any need to put on any slip protection or anything like that, and everything just works as described. Alrighty, so let's wrap this one up. Would I recommend the Cube Control CSX3? Yes. If you're in the market and have the budget for this wheel, this I feel is the best product on the market at the moment. So that 280mm mark just feels perfect in every car, okay? So the other real comparison to this is going to be the GSI Formula Elite, I believe it is, but that's a much wider wheel, 320mm, okay? So it doesn't sound like much, but it really deadens down the force, okay? The differences between this one and that one, obviously the ergonomics, the feel and everything, but that has a 5-inch screen. Now that, to me, would be useful. This 4-inch, unfortunately, I can't find too many situations, even when I was using on the G9, sorry, that everything relevant that I wanted to use on a screen, I kind of had on the screen. I can imagine my use may vary to everyone else's, but that's just my feelings on the matter. Touch points, amazing. Everything works as described. Everything has a positive click to it, and the feel is just amazing in hand. So, as I mentioned, the only downsides that I can see, hopefully they've fixed them in manufacturing, the shifters and also the support in terms of the software side of things. Really hope they get their act together and sort out those minor issues, because this is a near perfect product. With, you know, it kind of stands on its own. So if you're in the market for a 280mm odd wheel, this is the best product you can buy, in my opinion. Alrighty, so if you liked my review on this one, please give me a thumbs up. If you made it this far, I'd love if you could hit the subscribe button. Ask me questions, ask anything, I will jump on it. I've been responding to pretty much every single comment that I have seen. If you have any requests for reviews, content, shout out, I'll get onto them as soon as I can. But until the next one, guys, thanks so much.